The anterior past, in French, also known as le passé antérieur, is a literary past tense that developed from the Latin pluperfect, but it took on a more special role over time. In Old French, it was used in spoken and written language to express an action completed before another past action, but as French evolved, speakers were using simpler forms. The anterior past gradually disappeared from speech and was reserved for formal writing, like literature and academic accounts. Today, it's mainly used for historical narratives and almost always comes after conjunctions, like quand, lorsque, après que, aussitôt que, dès que. Its purpose is to express an action that had been completed just before another past action, and thus both were located in the past narrative. In other words, it's the literary version of the pluperfect, only used in written narration and paired with the simple past, since they both share the same literary time frame. Just like what I said in my previous video, this tense is good to know to understand stylistic and formal French in a literary context, but it's very obsolete in spoken French. In this video, we'll see the grammar and semantics of the tense, so if you're interested in reading French literature, the examples in this video will help in this context. However, if you learn to speak French, this information may not be relevant. To conjugate verbs in the anterior past, we have to follow a compound structure, using an auxiliary verb, avoir or être in the simple past, plus a past participle. This is a pattern that I thoroughly explained in my compound past video, along with understanding which auxiliary verb to use, so I would highly recommend watching that video before continuing with this one. Moreover, because we need the conjugations of avoir or être, we have to know what they look like in the simple past. I already showed the most irregular verbs in the simple past in the previous video, which included avoir and être. This is what they look like. J'ai, tu es, il, on eut, nous eûmes, vous eûtes, ils, ils eurent. Je fus, tu fus, il, on fut, nous fûmes, vous fûtes, ils furent. These are the conjugations we need to make sentences in the anterior past, with participles. We can start with the most common pattern where the auxiliary verb is avoir. Here, we're using verbs from every category along with their participles, conjugations, and examples. If you want to read them, you can do so on your own, but I choose not to do it because the tense is mainly about historical writing. It's not necessary to say it all the time, considering that the purpose of learning French in general is to speak it. Now, we can see the formation with être, which is mainly used with reflexive verbs and verbs of movement, again, in the context of literature. Because the tense has a compound pattern, don't forget that the past participle must agree in gender and number with the subject, again something I explained in my compound past video. As mentioned before, this tense adds a literary elegance and a sense of completion before another past action, and you can find it in French historical narration, if you're interested, but it's never used in speech. The irregularity in the anterior past comes from the auxiliary verb being conjugated in the simple past. Here, we can see two charts that give examples of avoir and être, so that you can see how irregular formations are used in a literary context. Ultimately, the most common irregular verbs in the compound past and simple past are formed the same way. Overall, this is how the anterior past fully works in French. The tense itself is completely literary, and you'll never hear it in everyday conversation. Its formation is made using a subject simple past conjugations of the auxiliary avoir or être and past participles. Its irregularity comes from the auxiliary verbs and past participle agreement, and for the final time, the tense is always found in literary writing, typically after conjunctions. In conclusion, what I showed across all of these videos is a full study of all French past tenses, understanding not just how to form them, but their history, nuance, and literary use. Now, you can review them and let the concepts sink in, as your mastery of the tenses will make reading, writing, and eventually speaking French much smoother, because in the next videos, we will see the future tenses in French.